over the past 10 years working with adults with ADHD, this is definitely the biggest thing that I have seen. If you don't fix this, you're always going to have ADHD symptoms and always have issues. Even for my own ADHD, I had to fix this problem. And typically, when we are getting treated with ADHD, we know, okay, yes, there's medications and there's also CBT. So CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. So these are great for helping supporting our ADHD, but it doesn't really address the root of the problem. They just kind of mask the symptoms, and then we might have to increase our medication dosage and then go in for more cognitive behavioral therapy to help with other past traumas that we're dealing with. But we got to understand, looking at body chemistry, okay? It is so vital that we have to look at the body chemistry. Otherwise, we don't know what we're looking for. We don't know what we need to understand of why we have all these different ADHD symptoms. So some of the biggest things that I see when I'm working with adults with ADHD, looking at first is looking at the hormone situation. So when we think about the hormones, there is definitely going to be some issues with certain organs that deal with hormones. So one of them being is the thyroid. And so you might have thought, okay, the thyroid, no big deal, there's no issue going on here, and that's all okay. So when we think of the thyroid, you know, it's no big deal, there's no issue going on here. But I need to help you understand that just because you got tested for your thyroid doesn't mean it's not a problem, especially with your ADHD. So let me explain here. So first off, thyroid stimulating hormones, so TSH, which you maybe got tested for, was done, and it's something that really is just something that the brain produces. It stands for thyroid stimulating hormone, okay? And so if that's the case, maybe that's fine. But there's other organs that deal with the thyroid. One being just the thyroid straight up, right? So the thyroid actually releases T3 and T4. And if those were never tested, then you definitely should get those tested because they can contribute to focus, motivation, drive issues, a lot of similar ADHD symptoms that are making it very difficult for you to address your ADHD symptom situation, okay? So the other part of this too is there's other important organs, such as like your heart is a big one that deals with thyroid hormone. Also yes, that's a really bad looking liver, but here's a gallbladder, there you go, is also the liver, deals with the thyroid hormone. So what if these are not working so great, okay? What if they just are not performing so well? Wouldn't that equate to maybe looking into that as a possibility that these aren't working optimally? So because if they're not working optimally, you better believe these levels, even TSH, are not going to be working very optimally. And what is that going to lead into? It's going to lead into more very similar ADHD symptoms, such as fatigue, brain fog, focus issues, motivation and drive, sleep issues, I mean, you name it, your metabolism, all of that. So I encourage you, the first thing you should be doing is going to your doctor and demanding that you do a full workup of not only looking at your thyroid, but saying, is your heart okay? Is it working, functioning properly? Is your liver enzymes working great? Is it all working optimally? Do you have cholesterol issues? Because if you have cholesterol issues, you better believe that your liver is being taxed way too much, especially if you are taking lots of medications. Everything has to get filtered through the liver. So if you've been taking lots of medications, this is very toxic to the liver. And so most adults have issues with their liver. It's not usually working optimally. So we need to support the liver. Okay, so I'll get to hear about what to do here in just a minute, but that is one thing that we need to understand. Now, the next thing is there is other hormones that we have to look at, and that is being the adrenals. And they sit above the kidneys. Now, let me explain why the adrenals are so important. It's because they release a hormone called cortisol. They also release things like epinephrine, norepinephrine. These three are very important to our ADHD. Let me explain why. Cortisol has a lot to do with energy. Epinephrine and norepinephrine have a lot to do with managing our stress. Now, why is that important? Well, from my experience working with adults with ADHD, these two things are some of the biggest issues. Not having enough energy, they reach that complete physical and mental burnout, and also just not able to manage their stress. And when they can't manage their stress, their ADHD symptoms tends to be significantly worse because this is not managed very well, okay? Now that's another part of this. Other things that we need to also consider here is definitely looking at the reproductive organs. So that's going to be, looking at, of course, is testosterone, also estradiol, progesterone, and also DHEA. Now, why is this vital? Well, if these are off, and especially adults tend to have this issue, is it will cause mood changes, fatigue, brain fog, focus issues. These are very similar to ADHD symptoms. So if you don't fix this, you're gonna have a very hard time trying to fix your ADHD symptoms. Because if this is the issue, doesn't matter what you do, doesn't matter how many medications you're taking with your ADHD, this won't change. Because this might be the root of the problem, and it needs to be addressed. Okay, hopefully this makes sense. Okay, so there has to do with the hormones. Now, there's a few other things that we do need to fix that I always see as a common problem with people with ADHD. So the next thing is the digestive system. Now, why the digestive system is so important and vital for ADHD is because 90 to 95% of a lot of our neurotransmitters are made in the gut. That's a big number. And guess what? If this is not working optimally, there's gonna be issues. You're not gonna be able to create and make as much different neurotransmitters as you need for like serotonin, dopamine, especially dopamine. About 50% or so of dopamine is made in the digestive system, okay? So if that's the case, we need to fix this as well. Now, another really big thing that also needs to be considered when it comes to identifying some additional problems with your ADHD, looking at other things with the brain chemistry. Okay, so I'm gonna get that. I know a lot of people are like, okay, well, what about the brain? Yes, the brain is definitely still really important. If I can actually draw a brain. There we go. So the brain chemistry utilizes a lot of different things in order to make neurotransmitters that are very important for us to be focused, productive throughout the day, and which we will see as things such as like dopamine, serotonin, and GABA are some of your big like neurotransmitter pathways. Now, these all require amino acids, different amino acids. Also, different vitamins, different cofactors. All of this is required in order to really help with building and modulating dopamine, serotonin, and also GABA. And all three of these are very vital when it comes to ADHD symptoms because they can cause high stress, cause focus issues, sleep issues, energy issues, you name it. That can be an actual culprit to the problem. And so when we understand that these are imbalances, especially if we can identify what amino acids are you actually deficient in. Is it tyrosine? Is it L-theanine that you need some improvement in there? Is it phenylalanine? It can be a number of different amino acids. That's not for today's video. I have lots of video on this stuff. But I need to help you understand that this can be the root of the problem. And if you don't fix this, your ADHD symptoms will never be fixed, okay? Now, if you're really struggling, you should really download my free guide in the description below that really goes more in depth of all the things you can implement as far as labs to do, nutrients to implement, and supplementation, all that kind of stuff. That's all in the description below, okay? Now, one other thing that I need to mention is very vital on top of looking at the brain chemistry is different micronutrient deficiencies. Micronutrient deficiencies can be the main problem. I've seen it time and time again. Things such as like vitamin D. I've had patients where when we have just found that their vitamin D levels were low and we supplemented, that was the big problem. In fact, they were able to stop their medication because that's why they had low energy, they couldn't focus, they couldn't be productive because this was so drastically low. Now, is that gonna be for everybody? No. There could be other things such as like B vitamins that could be low, iron is a big one, magnesium can be another one. So there's, and also even like things like zinc can be a huge one as well. It could also be choline. I've seen that one as a big one, especially for memory, or even like serine. Those big ones can be a culprit to your memory issue. So if you have significant memory issues, I usually see choline and serine levels tends to be a big problem with this. So hopefully you understand what needs to be done in order to fix the ADHD problem and not just relying on the medication. Like medications are great supportive stuff and can help you function, but in order to get to the root of the problem, you need to investigate really what's truly going on. So if you really want to understand my 3-step process of how I help my patients and clients with ADHD to eliminate their ADHD symptoms, then you should watch this video next where I discuss all about that. So watch this video next.